message, go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news,
Will, please bring us up to date.
or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons,
Very, very curious.
we bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Go to gbnews.com/shop now and take advantage of our biggest ever Black Friday sale with 25% off all items across our store and free shipping on orders worth £60 or more. There's never been a better time to grab something for the GB News fan in your life. From our signature clothing to drinkware, gifts, accessories and much, much more, you'll find the perfect present this festive season. Use the code BLACKFRIDAY25 on checkout at gbnews.com/shop for our best ever Black Friday deals.
Hello, good evening. It's me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, on State of the Nation. Tonight, the government is set to announce millions in extra funding for migrants' legal aid as a means of, quote, clearing the backlog, which is, of course, code for letting the vast majority of migrants in. Meanwhile, despite the welfare budget being £268 billion, Sir Keir Starmer has failed to deliver a promised crackdown on sickness benefits. I'll be joined by former Tory leader and Work and Pension Secretary, Sir Ian Duncan-Smith. Vauxhall has announced it is expected to close its Luton-based factory, putting over 1,000 jobs at risk. And as you may have guessed, the net zero drive is to blame. Plus, the former Prime Minister Boris Johnson has blamed the Church of England for the obesity crisis. Find out why for this evening's denouement. Have they been stealing the communion wafers? State of the Nation starts now. I'll be joined by my most pugnacious panel, Shadow Defence Minister Mark Francois and the author and journalist Michael Crick. As ever, let me know your views. It's a crucial part of the programme, mailmog@gbnews.com. But now, it's your favourite part of the evening, the News Bulletin with Katie Bowen.
Jacob, thank you, and a very good evening to you. It's just gone 8 o'clock. These are your latest headlines from the GB Newsroom. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is to bring a full outline of a ceasefire deal with Hezbollah to his cabinet later this evening. In a televised address, Mr Netanyahu said he will respond forcefully to any violation of the deal by Hezbollah. He went on to say that the ceasefire deal now means Israel will focus on the threat from Iran. The Israeli Prime Minister said, "We will return all of our hostages. We will ensure that Gaza will no longer pose a threat to Israel, and we will return the residents of the north safely to their homes." President Joe Biden is expected to deliver some remarks on the deal shortly from the White House. Business Secretary Jonathan Reynolds said it was a very difficult day for Luton after the owner of Vauxhall announced plans to shut its van-making factory. Vauxhall owner Stellantis has announced plans to shut the plant, putting more than 1,100 jobs at risk. The Luton site is expected to close next April. Stellantis, which also owns brands including Citroën, Peugeot and Fiat, said it would combine its electric van production at its other UK plant in Ellesmere Port. Stellantis added it hopes to transfer hundreds of jobs to the other plants. Rules imposed to speed up the transition to electric vehicles in the UK partly drove the decision, the company said. A Unite spokesman said the proposal that has been tabled today has been a complete slap in the face for our members in Luton, where Vauxhall vehicles have been manufactured for 120 years. Whatever the positive benefits this plan may have for Ellesmere Port, that is not acceptable. Russia has barred cabinet ministers, including Angela Rayner, Yvette Cooper and Rachel Reeves, from entering the country under new sanctions published by the Foreign Affairs Ministry. Jonathan Reynolds and Ed Miliband are also among the 30 British citizens listed. The Russian ministry said it was putting members of the UK's political and military establishment, as well as journalists, on its stop list. It comes as Russia earlier expelled a British diplomat and accused him of spying. Downing Street has denied these allegations, labelling them as baseless. And just briefly, the tobacco and vapes bill has cleared its first hurdle in the House of Commons this evening. MPs voted 415 to 47, that's a majority of 368, to approve the bill at second reading. Conservative Party leader Kemi Badenoch was among the 47 MPs to vote against the bill, according to the division list. There was a free vote for Tory MPs, with former Health Secretary Victoria Atkins among the 23 Conservatives who voted in favour of the bill. The bill will undergo further scrutiny at a later date. Those are your latest GB News headlines for now. Let's go back to Jacob.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Welcome back to State of the Nation. At the end of this week, the Home Office will publish its quarterly figures on both legal and illegal migration. Yesterday, we heard this reply from Home Office Minister Dame Angela Eagle on the question of migrant crime data.
I've been told by her department in response to a written question that the number of crimes committed by illegal migrants is not available through published statistics. I'm sure that the Home Office does hold the data, so would the Minister today commit to publishing that information in full?
There's a huge statistical drop of immigration-related national statistics coming at the end of this week.
So this Thursday will be an important day. We can expect legal migration to be down, mainly because of policies put in place by the previous Conservative government, but illegal migration, or as the new Labour government likes to call it, irregular migration, to be up. You may remember that Labour, appearing to possess magical powers, promised to abolish the migrant hotel regime, and yet it now confesses to have opened more hotels than it has closed. Speaking in the Commons yesterday, Yvette Cooper blamed the Tories. What a surprise.
But unfortunately, before the last election, the previous government cut asylum decision-making by 75% in the run-up to the election, took away caseworkers, and that is why the backlog was soaring. We have now put caseworkers back into place so that we can start clearing the backlog, because the asylum hotels are costing the taxpayer huge amounts of money.
And clearing the backlog is Labour's strategy for solving the migrant crisis. Indeed, it has announced millions of pounds in legal aid for migrants awaiting their asylum applications. But remember, clearing the backlog is a euphemism for letting the vast majority of those who apply in. Under the Refugee Convention, an estimated $750 million, 750 million people, more than 750 times the number of people who live in Somerset, qualify for refugee status in the United Kingdom. This means that the overwhelming majority of people who apply for it will be granted it. Fast-tracking applications means fast-tracking approvals, and fast-tracking approvals means incentivising more people to cross the Channel and come in illegally. Not only has Labour removed the only deterrent against crossing the Channel, the Rwanda plan, and not only has it decriminalised Channel crossings, but now it appears to be encouraging more people to cross by opening more hotels and giving asylum to nearly everyone who applies. Put simply, Labour's plan is a surrender plan. It wants to solve the migrant crisis by laying out the red carpet and saying, come on in, the water's lovely. As ever, let me know your views, mailmog@gbnews.com. But I'm joined now by my panel, Shadow Defence Minister Mark Francois and the author and journalist Michael Crick. Michael, let me come to you first, because this is very straightforward, isn't it? Labour is basically going to be saying, if you're here, you can stay. It has no policy for removing asylum seekers.
And what Labour are doing here is trying to make sure there are enough lawyers to actually process the claims properly. If there aren't enough lawyers, then it will take forever for the cases to go through the courts. Legal aid fees for migration cases have not been increased, as I understand it, since 1996, which is a drop of 48%, half in real terms. But no wonder nobody wants to be a migration lawyer. And the only way you're going to deal with that, market forces, pay them more.
It was really simple, though, wasn't it, under Priti Patel's bill, that people who came here illegally would have to go. And that's what we needed to do.
Inevitably, people who are genuine asylum seekers who come here are going to have to come here by
but Priti's bill just made it illegal to come here by boat. And if you were here illegally, you couldn't claim asylum.
That would have been far too harsh, in my view, because sometimes that is the only way of coming here.
Well, it seems to me we had a policy that could have worked and might actually have led to a decline in illegal arrivals and could even have removed some of the people here illegally. This is just complete surrender.
Well, in the real world, the effect of this change is it will be a pull factor. If you make it easier for people who get across the channel to claim asylum, if you make it quicker, if you speed that up, more people will be tempted to make a very perilous journey. And they're crossing the most congested shipping lane in the world. Tragically, a number of people, including children, have died mid-channel. But if word gets round that if you can make it, it'll be a lot quicker to get asylum status, more people will come.
And we know that word does get round because when Rwanda hadn't yet happened, people were going to the Republic of Ireland rather than coming to the United Kingdom because they were worried that the Rwanda scheme would mean that they were deported.
Yes, the Rwanda scheme was controversial. Some people liked the plan, some didn't. But it was one more plan than Labour have got. All this talk about smashing the gangs, the boats keep coming. So what this does is there will be more boats with more people on it because they will take a chance against getting political asylum quicker than they otherwise would do. So the practical effect, not the Islington dinner party consequence, the practical effect is more people will come.
And the practical effect of both of your policies, gentlemen, is that you keep people entrapped, unable to work, unable to lead proper lives, many of whom, I don't know the numbers, I don't know the figures, you don't either, many of whom are genuine, deserving asylum seekers fleeing from oppressive places like Afghanistan and Syria.
But they have all come here.
You are basically depriving them of liberty in order to deter.
No, there's no question of depriving them of liberty. They have deprived themselves of liberty to any extent because they have been in a previous safe country. That's the issue. They have no right to come here once they've been in a previous safe country. They could have stayed there.
They may well have made the decision that if they come here,
to come here.
They may well be they're English speakers that they're actually going to find it easier.
But this is economic migration. This is not asylum. No, and there are legal economic migration routes.
Yeah,
they've chosen an illegal route to jump the queue.
Well, I disagree that people should jump queues, but I think we've got to acknowledge that many of the... I mean, do you know what life is like in Afghanistan for people who are dissidents, people who espouse the absolute liberties that both of you do? If they speak out against the regime or in Iran or in... Yes?
If I may, we lost hundreds of British servicemen who were killed, thousands who were maimed with life-changing industries, attempting to defend democracy in Afghanistan. Unfortunately, Afghanistan is now under the rule of the Taliban, who we fought for 2 decades. So I don't think that it's right to criticise Britain for the fact that people are trying to get here from Afghanistan when we spent so much blood and treasure trying to make that a democratic state.
Well, you should, but nonetheless, we should be more sympathetic to people who come here from Afghanistan and indeed some of the other places.
But we can't realistically take everyone from Afghanistan or from Syria.
Sorry.
We can't take everyone from Afghanistan or Syria or indeed from China. All three are repressive regimes.
Well, I agree you can't take everybody from those, and that's why you need this process of considering the cases.
We have a process for legal migration.
To do that properly, you need lawyers, and you need a court system, you need translation. It is a long, laborious process.
Mr. Michael, respectfully, if Jacob's figure is correct, that under the Refugee Convention, 750 million people worldwide might technically qualify if they applied for asylum. That is 10 times the population of the United Kingdom. I mean, we couldn't possibly...
this is an absurd thing to say, because there's no way in a million years 750 million people are going to turn up here.
No.
It'd be a very crowded set of islands.
No, Michael,
if they did.
No, but if technically those people would qualify under the current regime, I'm not saying 750 million, but a lot of them would. And human nature being what it is, if you say, if you get here, if you get across the channel, there's a better chance and a quicker chance you'll get asylum. More people will risk it. That's the real world.
That may be the case, but the real world right now is just how unfair it is that when people do get here, they have to wait for years to have their cases processed.
Well, if they
because we are not decent enough to pay
so
the lawyers.
Why don't they apply in Germany or France or Italy?
All right.
Well, some of them do.
I ought to say the figure, the 750 million figure, is the Centre for Policy Studies figure that I was quoting. And I think
Centre for Policy Studies, that is a right-wing think tank, isn't it? It's not as right-wing as it used to be.
But it's a very robust figure. I'm surprised it's as low as that, actually. Thank you to my panel. I'm joined now by a friend of the programme, immigration lawyer Ivan Sampson. Ivan, you must like this answer, that the answer to all the world's problems is to have a few more lawyers.
No, not at all. Look, what we need is good decision-making, first of all, by the Home Office. And if you look at the number of asylum decisions, which is around 90,000, and you've got to give credit to the Conservative government when it was in power, it's up 4 times from the previous year. So in 2024, we had 92,000 decisions made, and that was because they recruited more people. And that's great, but the decision-making is still very poor, because of the 100,000 asylum applications we get a year, approximately, 58% are granted asylum. Of the 40% that go on to appeal, 20% are successful. So a fifth of cases are poorly decided, not proper decisions. A lot of it is because of translation problems, as your guest quite rightly said. They don't have the right data on country information. It's old information, and so and proper training by the decision makers themselves. I've found decision makers making letters to be just cut and pasted with errors, as much as even getting the name of the asylum applicant wrong. So we need good decisions, first of all.
But don't we actually need a system that deters people from coming? And that's why Rwanda was such a good idea, because it would have taken people to a safe third country. It would have made it much harder for people to game the system, that people seem to be saying, giving answers that match the needs of the asylum system, and that a safe third country would have broken through all of that.
No, I disagree with you, Jacob, on this point, because we're either in the convention or we're not. We've got to make a fundamental decision. Either we are going to accept asylum applications, which is why we joined the convention, or we're not. And if we don't want to do it, let's get out of it. But
all right, no, you're adding to my list of international bodies that I think we should pull out of. The Refugee Convention, the European Convention on Human Rights, and the International Criminal Court. But I think if we want to sort out asylum and illegal immigration, we have to coin a phrase to take back control, that we are never going to do it when we are hemmed in by a succession of international organisations and agreements.
Well, I think you should read the Refugee Convention in full, first of all. And if you read it, you'd understand that it's not illegal to come across the channel. It isn't.
It was under... Hold on, sorry to interrupt you, Ivan, but it was under a law that we passed. The Priti Patel law made it illegal to claim asylum or to come into the country on a small boat, whatever your reason.
Priti Patel actually made it a criminal offence to come across. And what happened was the civil service refused to do that. They said, no, we'll be breaking international law by doing that, and she had to reel back on that. So that's not true. It's called irregular migration. You need to get the terminology right. It's not illegal.
That's the Labour Party's line.
It's irregular. Sorry?
That's the Labour Party's line. Ivan, unfortunately, we're out of time, so we'll have to get you on for longer. But thank you for joining me from your remote eyrie this evening. After the break, I will be speaking to former Tory leader and Work and Pension Secretary Sir Ian Duncan-Smith about Labour's non-plan for the UK's benefits crisis.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Following the summer riots and the resurgence of far-right ideologies, the former Education Secretary told peers that reinforcing shared values is now more crucial than ever.
So we're asking this morning, should we teach British values or would it be a step backward?
Or how do you even start? To debate this now, we're joined by the Campaign for Real Education Chairman, Chris McGovern, and political commentator Matthew Stadlen.
Well, I think these days, particularly in schools, it's quite fashionable to look at the negative sides of Britain's identity, particularly British history. Personally, I think I'm very proud of being British, and I think we need to be proud of our country like most other countries around the world are.
As Chris says, Matthew, lots of other countries do it. Heck, you only have to look at the United States, don't you, to see how sort of patriotic they are. Is there anything wrong in trying to instil a bit of that amongst our youth?
I'm just worried it sounds a little bit communist, Stephen, being told what it is to be British. I've got my own personal but very vague views of what British values might be: inclusivity, patience, being able to queue, decency, respect for democracy and the rule of law. But I mean, very many people will have different sets of values. Some people are racist. So are British values racist? You talked about the far right. I think we all know what the far right is. It's sort of violent, xenophobic racism. But if you have, say, I don't know, 3-4 million people in this country who might describe themselves as racist or far right, and they're British, or as British as you lot and as I am, does that mean those values get taught in schools? My worry is it's a little bit communist.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Weekdays on GB News. Wake up to breakfast every day from 6 a.m. Followed by Britain's newsroom at 9:30. At noon, it's Good Afternoon Britain. Followed by Martin Daubney from 3 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. I'm still Jacob Rees-Mogg, and we were talking about asylum, and the mail mogs have come zooming in. Neil, a Yorkshire lad, says, even if you're a genuine asylum seeker, and I suspect that number is minuscule, you still don't get a global golden travel ticket to any country on the planet. And Betty says, Jacob, the best deterrent is to turn the boats back mid-channel and get them back to France. Stop them getting here in the first place, like Australia. And Bob says, I like Bob's mail mog, I struggle to understand why people who enter this country illegally are put up in hotels and not detained. My 2 points are as follows. They have travelled through safe countries. They have entered the country illegally. I appreciate the lack of caseworkers, but the law should be upheld. And this is my favourite line, much to be encouraged in mail mogs. As usual, I find myself agreeing with you. We often read those ones out. I can't think why. In what was briefed to be Labour's crackdown on the ballooning welfare budget, its new plan appears to be smoke and mirrors. Despite the total budget of the Department for Work and Pensions reaching £268 billion, Labour's so-called Back to Work plan does not include a crackdown on out-of-work sickness benefits. However, Labour does plan to stop giving benefits to unemployed 18 to 21-year-olds if they refuse to take up jobs or training opportunities. Well, I'm joined now by somebody who knows more about this than almost anyone else in the country, former Tory leader and Work and Pensions Secretary, Sir Ian Duncan-Smith. And my panel is still with me too. Ian, when you left office, the number of workless families was the lowest it's been.
Yeah, workless households are the lowest since records began.
How did you do this, and what needs to be done?
Well, the issue was slightly different then. First thing was you have to recognise that any benefit system has carrots, but it also has to have sticks. In other words, there will be people there that simply will find lots of ways not to go to work. I know it sounds cynical, but that's a fact of life. And those that can need some guidance and help if they're having a problem, but they'll go back to work. They'll be more motivated. But if you look at the moment, what happened was COVID hit the benefit system like an explosive rocket. And what's happened since then is people got used, most of all, for not having to go to work. It's affected people's mental health being out of work. That period in lockdown has probably done more damage to people's stability mentally than anything I can recall since the Second World War. And you look at the school kids that have been coming of age, they all had their selves left at home, and lots of them have suffered. So first of all, we've inbuilt a whole process of mental health problems. So the biggest claims on sickness benefit are about 60%, 70% are mental health now. And of those, about 60% are suffering from depression and anxiety. Now, depression and anxiety are very treatable conditions, but there is no correlating treatment available. So what you have to do is, and this is the other bit the NHS has recognised when I was there, and I hope it still remains, is that work is a health treatment for people with depression and anxiety. In other words, getting into work is the most important thing you can do because it restabilises you, brings you back into contact with people. Staying at home on benefits is a disaster for you. It just gets worse.
And there's a very strong correlation between male mental health, particularly, and unemployment.
Yes, huge. It's probably the biggest group that is unemployed with mental health problems will be men.
OK, so the carrot is treatment. What sticks do you think are practical?
Well, I would do a number of things. First of all, I think this white paper is low on what they're going to do, and it goes into the long grass sometime well late into next year if they do anything at all before they do anything. They should be moving now because it just gets worse in the meantime. So there are two or three things. There is a glimmer of hope on the horizon. I have argued for some time that the sixth benefit that was meant to be in universal credit had to come in, but Treasury fought it because they didn't want to spend the money. It's now happening under the last government. Sickness benefit is going into universal credit. Now, that's important because if you went onto sickness benefit, you were hardly ever going to be seen again or even rechecked in many senses. So you languished on that benefit with nobody saying to you, let's help you find work. Now it's coming into universal credit. The whole system's based on accountability and human interface. So that means that it will enable the job centres to begin to get after those on sickness benefit, to see them, to get them into work. The second thing I would do almost immediately is there has always been this, this was brought in by Labour, sickness benefit, by the way, and I always struggled with it, but they had this 16-hour limit of the amount of work you could do if you're on sickness benefit. I think that's a complete waste of time. You should get rid of that limit. And people say, what if they go work? I want them to work. So what I'd say is, you can work as much as you like, declare it, and universal credit will taper it away as you go up the hours. So get them into work. Don't stop them. Don't make criminals out of them. Don't make them go into the black economy. Get them working properly. And the final problem is by raising the cost, by bringing the threshold down to £5,000 on national insurance, all that part-time work is going to really hurt the DWP because lots of people first go into part-time work before moving on to full-time work. Lots of employers are now saying they can't afford many of those on part-time work because they'll be paying national insurance on them. So that's two elements. You want to get them into work, but at the same time, you clobber the route into work.
Michael, can I bring you in on this? Because it seems to me Labour wants two contradictory things, that it's clobbered businesses with taxes and now it wants to get people back into employment, but employers aren't going to be offering new jobs because they've just been clobbered with taxes.
Yeah, I agree with that, actually. I've said on your programme before, I think that the combination of measures that Labour announced in the budget and other things that have happened as well are not conducive to creating jobs and to growth in the economy. So Labour have made a mistake there, and it is very much linked. It's such a complex area, this. It involves the health service as well, of course, and getting queues down and getting appointments and getting more people through the health service so they can get back into work. We've got that. This has to be dealt with energy and imagination and experimentation, and we should people should try not to be partisan. We should be looking at all the things that Ian did when he was in office and his think tanks proposed, and we should look at foreign experience.
And do you think this white paper is a good start?
Well, I think it's it seems to lack ambition. I mean, this idea of reorganising job centres, yeah, good idea, but I'm not sure that is going to make a huge amount of difference, and it doesn't seem to be very much money involved anyway. It's got to be much more energetic and more ambitious than this, and this has got to be simply the start. Ian's right as well, and you're both right. I think you do need to have sticks as well as carrots.
Mark, Liz Kendall is a very thoughtful person, a good appointment by Keir Starmer, really trying to do the right thing, but as Michael says, in a complex area. So this is, in a sense, building on what Ian did, rather than we may want it to go further, but it's a good position to be starting from.
Perhaps, but I think if we look at the scale of it, I mean, I defer, Ian is the absolute subject matter expert, but if you look at the scale of it, we're now spending on disability and sickness benefits about £65 billion a year. That's about the size of the entire UK defence budget when there's a war in Ukraine, instability in the Middle East, and China's threatening Taiwan. So that's how much money this is taking. And I think part of the problem Labour have is they were briefing very tough into the papers. You know, they were using words like implying a crackdown, and then they come up with something which is a bit of a mouse. And you could argue that they've sort of kicked the can down the road here. So, I mean, if I were Liz Kendall, what I would do, I'm not playing up to him, you know, I'd get IDS in for a day and say, what do I do? I mean, I think that's the most positive thing they could do, because you've got the absolute subject matter expert, and I'm sure Ian being here would help, right?
I'm happy to help, if anybody wants to ask me.
I think the other thing we've got to... Why is it that we have suffered so much more from COVID than other countries? We need to get to the bottom of that.
Ian, is this our fault as the Conservative government failed to bring back any of the controls after COVID? And that actually one should have some sympathy for Labour in this circumstance, because we dropped the ball after 2023.
My personal view is we overcooked the money going out in the first place. I mean, if you think the bounce-back loans, all great ideas, but they were defrauded massively, and people who were unemployed were putting up businesses which disappeared the day after they got the loans. No loans, they're just gifts. I thought I'll be honest with you, right, I disagreed with some of the ways they paid the money out. I would have taken everybody onto universal credit and then dropped them down into the hours to next to 0 hours. That way you had them on record, and when the moment came to move them back into work, you could have moved them straight back into work. So having a furlough scheme alongside a benefit scheme meant that people were hopping between the two. So there were issues and problems the way. I'm not, you know, we had to all learn a message, but what was definitely going on afterwards was we had to get after those problems of sickness benefit. And as I said, there is a way to deal with sickness benefit by having it in universal credit, which they finally agreed in the last year. And there's another thing called universal support, which runs alongside universal credit, because you now know with universal credit exactly what's happening in a household, not one person. So you can start targeting help and support and get them out.
So to be fair to Labour, which may pain us to do, they actually inherited quite a difficult situation, which they're now trying to improve.
Yeah. But there was also one other problem, though, is that we didn't move fast enough. It was going to happen to us anyway with all this money going out, but we needed to move fast enough. And the key element of this is GPs, they don't like dealing with mental health much because they feel they're inexpert on it. So what they do is they tend to sign people off. It's not their fault. They need to go to health practitioners that are experts in mental health, and that's one of your ways to deal with it.
Ian and my panel, thank you very much. In a moment, we will be discussing the latest consequences of Labour's war on business. More than 1,000 jobs are at risk in Luton. Plus, some good news has emerged from the Falkland Islands, which could rescue Labour's sluggish economy.
Hello and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. The next 24 hours see a return to wet weather in the south with blustery winds. A different story further north where frost and fog will prevail because of high pressure sitting to the north of Scotland. That's keeping winds light and skies clear as we go into Tuesday night. Meanwhile, another low turns up across the southwest. Wet and windy weather into southwest England, South Wales, and then by midnight running along the south coast, pushing into the Midlands, East Anglia and the southeast. The heaviest rain will be along southern counties of England, with the risk of localised flooding because it's coming on top of all the wet weather we've recently had, and it's going to be an unsettled but mild start to Wednesday in the south and across central parts of England and Wales. Very different conditions for Scotland and Northern Ireland, where we start with clear spells, frost and some dense fog patches, especially for parts of Northern Ireland. Poor visibility on the roads first thing, so watch out for that. Also some fog patches for southern Scotland, northern England. Chilly start out there. But for the Midlands, East Wales, East Anglia and the southeast, a damp start to the day with the winds pushing outbreaks of rain or showers in from the southwest, and then those winds changing direction as the rain clears into the afternoon and becoming increasingly strong down the eastern side of England. Meanwhile, brightening skies for West Wales, the southwest, as well as northern England and Northern Ireland once any early fog patches clear. A crisp but bright day for northern and eventually western parts of the country, whilst it stays cloudy and breezy further southeast. Thursday starts with outbreaks of rain into the southwest. This rain, generally light and patchy, shouldn't cause too many issues, but it then spills into Northern Ireland as well as parts of Wales, whilst it stays dry and bright further north and east. Friday's similar. We're going to see some rain at times in the west, and it turns milder by Saturday.
Why go out on a Friday night when Friday night comes straight to your home?
Talking about?
Join me and my A-team of top pundits. Chemistry tonight is electric. As we tackle the big stories of the day with wit, insight and fearless energy.
Man of the people.
It's all vibe.
Just a filing cabinet on wheels with a tie on.
So, order in Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, every Friday at 8, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Vauxhall owner Stellantis has announced plans next April to shut its van-making factory in Luton, putting more than 1,100 jobs at risk. Amidst rumours Labour is rethinking its electrical vehicle policy, Stellantis blamed the quotas that force electric vehicles to make up at least 22% of manufacturers' sales and charges penalties of up to £15,000 per vehicle for its decision to close the factory. Well, I'm joined now by motor journalist Quentin Wilson, as well as my panel, Shadow Defence Minister Mark Francois, and the author and journalist Michael Crick. Quentin, thank you very much for coming in to join us. Everybody is now beginning to realise that this headlong rush to get rid of petrol and diesel cars is going to cost thousands of jobs, not just here, but in Europe as well. And people are beginning to pull back from it, aren't they?
Well, Luton, they export 70%, over 70% of their vans to other countries. So it's not just EVs, it's the global situation. We've got declining markets in Germany, we've got declining markets in France. So, you know, a lot of those are diesel vans, not electric. So you can't blame closing Luton on EVs.
It's the fine of £15,000 that makes the balance of profitability on petrol and diesel cars.
But in reality, nobody's going to be fined this year. And I completely agree. You should not be taking money away from car manufacturers that they could spend on R&D and development. That money should come back to them. It's completely wrong-headed.
And the Germans are getting very fed up with this too and are putting pressure on the EU to change the programme. And if that happens, then, of course, the export opportunities begin to reopen up.
Well, the German economy, as you know, Jacob, is not doing well at all.
It's not doing well.
No, but you've got companies like Mercedes and BMW who are doing very well with electric cars. But you've got some companies like Ford and Nissan, who didn't make the right model decisions, didn't plan ahead, their management was not right, and they find themselves without products to sell.
But isn't the whole idea of the £15,000 petrol car tax one that goes against consumer choice? That people would buy electric cars if they really wanted to, and some people are. But that if you have to have a massive tax to push people away from petrol and diesel cars, there's something wrong with the way policy is developing.
That policy of the £15,000 is, as I've said, completely wrong. And we should make sure that money stays in the UK and we don't pay, for instance, Tesla for credits and things like that. We need the money here. It should not go abroad. But you also need incentives. We need to help consumers who have got no help at all to buy electric cars. And that Z mandate is very important because it means that you get lots of second-hand cars coming into the market, electric cars, and that means they become more affordable. If you take those mandates away, Jacob, they will just carry on always making diesel and petrol cars. And it's mandates like that stop us having lead in petrol and things like that. You do need a nudge to the market.
But would you buy a second-hand electric car?
Yeah, I have.
OK, he's very brave. Mark, isn't this all our fault? We introduced this stupid policy and then Rishi rolled back on it a little, but nothing like enough.
Jacob, I think it's a much broader question than just these EV regulations. And this is very tough news for the people of Luton. But this is a disinvestment in the United Kingdom by Stellantis. If you go back to a week into the general election, Rachel Reeves gave this big speech about what would be the economic policy of an incoming Labour government. She famously said, I looked it up the other day, that all their plans would be fully costed and fully funded. And then she said a few minutes later, so there was no need for tax rises under a Labour government. She has a budget. She puts them up by 40 billion. She was criticised at the CBI for doing that. What international investors want more than anything is stability. They want to know that if they invest X, they can reasonably calculate a return of Y. And unfortunately, Labour's policies are so anti-business, you are starting to see big companies being disinclined to invest in the United Kingdom. And I fear, though I don't welcome it, we're going to see a lot more of this, EV regulations notwithstanding.
Michael?
Well, I agree with Quentin. We need the incentive. The nudge and the carrot regime is clearly wrong, and it needs to be rethought. But, you know, we shouldn't just sort of abandon the idea of having electric cars or electric vans. That is the future. We've got to stick to our goals when it comes to and these are government policy, and they were your government policy. You two may not agree with them, but we've got to stick with our goals.
Well, I think they're terrible policies because the pigeons...
I mean, I'm not even sure you think that global warming is a problem, or does it exist, do you?
Oh, I don't deny that it exists.
Right.
I just
do you not think we should do something about it?
No, because we don't make a blind bit of difference.
Well, that is a bit of... I mean, you could say that about all sorts of things in life.
You could, yes.
It's very sensible. Leave it to somebody else. But actually, the Chinese are doing rather well when it comes to tackling global warming.
Not really.
And they're doing very well when it comes to building electric cars.
They are.
And we should be ashamed. You should be ashamed of yourself.
Because by getting rid of petrol and diesel cars, we're handing over business to the Chinese. I don't want to do that.
But if we don't do this and do the Z mandate and make these cars and build the factories here, then the Chinese will simply take us over. It's an industrial story.
Or we could just carry on with petrol
cars.
But then, which would be easier and nicer.
It's a sunset industry. Jacob, you're ideologically opposed to electric cars. We know this, but if you look at the industrial picture, the rest of the world is converting. If we just dig our...
Well, not necessarily America with Trump.
Well, yes, that's...
If I may, look...
All right, we're going to go on, because this is more about drill, baby, drill. Before the break, I want to ask my panel about a new report which has suggested the oil field under the Falklands Islands contains nearly 1 billion barrels of oil, a real investment opportunity for this Labour government. Back to my panel. This is worth £55 billion, potentially. This is wonderful, isn't it?
It's absolutely fantastic. And this would be a great resource, and providing Ed Miliband can get over it and doesn't try and impose any sort of restrictions on the Falkland Islands government. We spend a lot of money, quite rightly, defending the Falkland Islands. It would be great if we could use some of this, that oil wealth, to relieve the pressure on the defence budget so that the Falklands pay more towards their own defence. There are lots and lots of potential advantages in this, and I cannot see any downsides. We should drill, baby, drill around the Falklands.
This is really exciting, isn't it, Michael? It's similar in size to the North Sea.
And, I mean, I know the Falkland Islands had their independence when it comes to decisions like this, but we do have a say when it comes to their foreign policy and their defence policy. And if I was the government, I would invite the First Minister of the Falkland Islands, or whoever it is the boss these days, over to here to sort this out. We can't just restrict the way in which we rely on carbon and allow the Falkland Islands to drill more of it out of the ground than ever, particularly for an island when you think that the first people that are going to suffer from global warming in terms of states are going to be island states. Now, not the Falklands. The Falklands are quite hilly.
It'd be wonderful for the Falklands if
Hang on, wait a minute. Look, we're an island.
Yeah.
Look,
well, we should have some sympathy with those islands around the world who, within our lifetimes, are going to cease to exist because of global warming.
You mentioned China earlier.
Yeah.
China is responsible for almost a third of total global emissions. And by the way, they're still opening one coal-fired power station a month, right? The UK is responsible for approximately 1%.
Well, you can't just say the big countries can deal with it and us little ones, we're going to ignore it. That is morally irresponsible.
Michael, with respect, I didn't say that. I didn't get a chance to say anything because you talked all over me. Let me say what I want to say.
Go on then.
That doesn't mean because we're only responsible for 1%, we shouldn't make an effort. But it's a global problem. And so you've got to get the major emitters like China and India and the US and Brazil to do something more muscular about it. Even if we all went back to living in caves tomorrow, and I think that's what some people would like, it wouldn't scratch the damage that China is doing day in, day out. So we just have to have a proportionate way of dealing with this and allowing the Falklands to use oil. We're an island. We've used oil for decades. Doesn't mean that the planet is finished. We just got to be realistic about it.
Well, the Falklands doesn't need an oil industry. The Falklands the economy is doing extremely well. Their GDP per head is almost twice what it is. And they're the 10th richest country in the world in terms of GDP per head.
There aren't many people to spread the calculation across, are there?
Well, are you saying that if the Falklands extract all this oil, then we don't need to extract from the North Sea anymore? It's not going to come here.
Whose oil would you rather have? Sorry? The Falklands oil or Middle Eastern oil?
I would prefer to... I think we need to reduce our reliance on oil all round, the Falkland Islands and us, and we need to... program it so that we extract it from the ground.
Right, you ring up Xi, you get him to promise you, Michael Crick, as a committed, as someone who feels strongly about this, that he's going to stop building coal-fired power stations, and then we'll come back on and we'll have a chat about oil drilling. But in the meantime, if people want to save the planet, they want to go and protest outside the Chinese embassy.
Well,
that's the fact of it.
In the meantime, they should pick up a penguin and drill, baby, drill. Thank you to my panel. After the break, for this evening's denouement, French word, you will find out why the former Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, has blamed the Church of England for the obesity crisis.
Dubes & Co. Weekdays from 6 p.m.
This is a topic very close to my heart. I have become fully convinced that social media, smartphones are one of the primary causes of mental health problems in children and many other serious problems beside. Lots of governments are starting to talk about this, but the Australians are well ahead in their use of legislation. What do you think about this issue?
Well, I think you're right. I mean, I've got 3 young children and I'm really concerned about... I mean, they're too young to be on social media, but I'm really concerned about what lies ahead for them. I'm not sure I support what Australia's doing, not because I don't think it's a good idea to ensure that age verification is right. I'm just not sure that the age 16 is appropriate. But that's progress. If we effectively, as I do, accept the point that we need some sort of control, then we can move to a proper debate about whether that's 16, 14, 13, whatever it may be. And, of course, there are age restrictions on things like Facebook. I think, from memory, it is 13.
Yes, but it's a tick box.
But it's a tick box, so all you can do is you can just knock. If you're 11 years old, you can just predate your date of birth by 2 years, and you can get on. I think what Australia is proposing is interesting because it will stop young people, maybe without their parents' knowledge, short-circuiting the system because they're going to be asking for proper age verification and ID. That's definitely something we should do in the UK because it's enforcing the existing law. Query, is 16 the right age, Miriam?
I completely agree with it. It's something I actually said should have been done before. And I think what is good about it is that for a long time, a lot of governments have been saying that the actual social media companies should take more responsibility, but they're not going to because it hurts their bottom line. The most voracious users are younger users. So they will pledge that, oh, I'll put the tick box in, but the kid is the one who's going to actually tick the box. So doing something like this is saying that, OK, we will put in legislation that damages your bottom line. And I think it will force the hand because they've said it's only 12 months and they will reevaluate it.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+ and on the GB News app. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with GB News Radio. We are the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Well, forget Switzerland. Britain is the land of chocolate, and Somerset more so than any other county. Though we proudly lay claim to the invention of the cream egg, our country seems to have more than its fair share of fatties. In a recent intervention, Boris Johnson, Slim Bojo as he's known to his friends, has criticised the Church of England for its role in the obesity crisis, blaming its emphasis upon slavery reparations for driving away congregations and failing to provide people with their proper spiritual sustenance. Boris is essentially paraphrasing Matthew 4:4. Man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds out of the mouth of God. Do we hear too little about God from the Church of England and too much wokery that is making us plump? Well, I'm joined now by Catholic layman and former chaplain to Queen Elizabeth II, Gavin Ashenden. Gavin, it is kind of you to join me. Are we being a bit mean as fellow Catholics, and Boris is another fellow Catholic, in blaming the poor old Church of England for turning everybody in this country into a fatty?
Well, yes, I think I love Slim Bojo, Saint Slim Bojo. You might have said. Boris has done what he's so very good at, and that is an exercise in imaginative lateral thinking. So the two things are both true. There is an obesity crisis, and there's a spirituality crisis. I don't think, although they're linked, one hasn't directly caused the other. So, but it's no bad thing for Boris to get us thinking about both. And even if we can't solve the problem of the Church of England, which then clearly won't solve processed food, at least perhaps we can think more creatively about how food might improve and how the spirituality of the nation might improve, even if there's not a direct link.
Well, you see, Gavin, I think you're absolutely right. And I think Boris, as he so often does, manages by using unexpected language to highlight a real problem. And there is a spiritual desert in this country. I found this when knocking on doors during the election campaign. People were talking to me about it and saying they wanted more in their lives. But the church is, and it's not just the Anglican Church, it may be our church too, and the Methodists aren't filling that void. They're not out enough talking about God and the commandments and the love of Christ and the intercession of the Blessed Virgin. They're not giving people the spiritual nourishment that they need. And to some extent, then people fill the void with other things.
I think that's true. I mean, you could make an analogy and say that the equivalent of processed food in the life of the Christian church is a politicization of faith. The real thing is something different, as you quite rightly say. It's an authentic spirituality, and it's supernatural. I mean, that's one of the strengths the Catholic Church has, and it's why a large number of people have moved from being Anglicans to becoming Catholics, because the Anglican Church has had difficulty in managing the supernatural, and the Catholic Church is nothing if it is not supernatural. So in a strange way, I'm not disappointed, because I think that it was the Catholic Church and Catholic Catholic evangelists that converted Europe away from paganism. Some of our more sensible commentators are saying that Europe is not slipping into atheism as we used to think, but it's slipping into a kind of neo-paganism, a new form of superstition, believing in lots of different gods, which are actually harder to believe in than the real God, and certainly much less attractive than Jesus. I think the church has it clearly has a wonderful treasure on its hand in the form of who Jesus is and what he taught. And as St. Augustine said, there's a God-shaped hole at the heart of everybody. I think the church would find a welcome audience if it began to talk about the person it's in love with, which is Jesus. And it's just lost confidence. But this doesn't apply just to the churches in this country. It's a crisis right throughout the West. It's part of the fault line that runs through our civilization.
Is it a crisis of prosperity that, if you look at Poland, for example, which under communism was enormously religious, even in Poland, religious attendance has declined as the country's become more prosperous, and that people, when mammon takes over, lose their feeling for the spiritual?
I'm sure that's true. I think there are a number of reasons. There is another one, which is part of the political outlook of the left, which is there's nothing really wrong with human beings that we can't fix by trying a bit harder, giving a bit more education, a better economic climate. But that simply isn't true. Any reading of history shows that there's a really rather dark flaw running through humanity. And the 20th century, with its mechanized killing of so many millions, ought to be a lesson to all of us. What Christianity says is it tries to build a bridge between the awful behavior of human beings and the extraordinary things that we hope for, this constant hunger for heaven that we've got. Now, you can only do that by taking Jesus seriously, by taking the gospel seriously, by taking the experience of the church seriously.
And this is very important, that original sin means you need forgiveness, and forgiveness means you need Christ, and that creates a spiritual life.
Yes, that's right. And part of the problem with wokery, and I'm afraid with all revolutionary politics of the left, is that they're absolutely determined to believe there is no original sin. There's really nothing wrong with human beings that political programs can't fix. So in one sense, Boris is right. He's right to say that there's a real conceptual problem at the heart of our civilization, and the church has got the key to put it right if only it would talk about it.
Thank you so much, Gavin. Up next, it's Ben Leo in for Patrick Christie's. Ben, are you going to be talking about original sin on your programme this evening?
No, fascinating debate. We are going to be covering that Boris topic. He also blames the fear of paedophiles, where children aren't allowed to play on the streets anymore, and that's why they're getting fatter. Elsewhere, the BBC has crowned its BBC Female Footballer of the Year. The only problem is, Jacob, we're not sure whether the winner, a Zimbabwean footballer who plays for Orlando, is a man or a woman. We'll find out.
Well, I'm not sure I'm interested in that, really. We want to talk about cricket, much more civilised game. Otherwise, fascinating. That's all coming up after the weather. I'll be back tomorrow at 8 o'clock. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg. This has been State of the Nation. And the weather forecast for Somerset. My goodness, it's going to be beautiful there tomorrow. Absolutely perfect. Tip-top. I was there earlier on today and the sun was shining, the sky was blue, the floodwaters had receded. It was really like Noah returning from his ark being in Somerset today.
Even though we'll see a cloudy start, it'll be a bright outlook for the rest of the day. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. The next 24 hours see a return to wet weather in the south with blustery winds. A different story further north where frost and fog will prevail because of high pressure sitting to the north of Scotland. That's keeping winds light and skies clear as we go into Tuesday night. Meanwhile, another low turns up across the southwest. Wet and windy weather into southwest England, South Wales, and then by midnight running along the south coast, pushing into the Midlands, East Anglia and the southeast. The heaviest rain will be along southern counties of England with the risk of localised flooding because it's coming on top of all the wet weather we've recently had, and it's going to be an unsettled but mild start to Wednesday in the south and across central parts of England and Wales. Very different conditions for Scotland and Northern Ireland, where we start with clear spells, frost and some dense fog patches, especially for parts of Northern Ireland. Poor visibility on the roads first thing, so watch out for that. Also some fog patches for southern Scotland, northern England. Chilly start out there. But for the Midlands, East Wales, East Anglia and the southeast, A damp start to the day with the winds pushing outbreaks of rain or showers in from the southwest, and then those winds changing direction as the rain clears into the afternoon and becoming increasingly strong down the eastern side of England. Meanwhile, brightening skies for West Wales, the southwest, as well as Northern England and Northern Ireland once any early fog patches clear. A crisp but bright day for northern and eventually western parts of the country, whilst it stays cloudy and breezy further southeast. Thursday starts with outbreaks of rain into the southwest. This rain, generally light and patchy, shouldn't cause too many issues, but it then spills into Northern Ireland as well as parts of Wales, whilst it stays dry and bright further north and east. Friday's similar. We're going to see some rain at times in the west, and it turns milder by Saturday.
We'll see a cold snap, which will quickly develop into a warm front. Boxed Boiler Repairs, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Imagine getting a call to tell you that you've won £50,000 in tax-free cash, our biggest cash prize of the year.
Oh my God.
That's a big surprise.
Oh my God. This is amazing.
I'm in shock. That is absolutely fantastic.
Thank you.
For your